We're on the Mishnah on Daf Chesam Beis, and the Mishnah continues its discussion about Olas Re'iyah and Shalmei Chagiga that have to be brought on the Regel. Misha Yeshlo Ochlim Berubin. He's got many people to feed, and he needs an ample volume of basar for the moed. But nechasim mu'atim, his funds are limited. So he doesn't really have enough money to buy many behemos to supply his entire family with meat. Mevi shlamim merubim vi olos mu'atos. Shlamim is nechal lebailim. We can eat the basar. Olos is kula kolim. So in the case of olos, the fact that he has a large Baruch Hashem household is irrelevant because nothing's going to be eaten from the olos at all. So therefore, bring a carbon that's worth more kesef, according to Beis Hillel, and that's it. But in the case of shlamim, here's your opportunity to expand the volume of basa. The only thing is, as the Gemara is going to point out, how does he have the money to buy all these karbanos? We're talking about someone whose financial bank account, his financial assets are somewhat limited. So we'll see the Gemara about that. Now we have a second scenario. Nechasim merubim, quite wealthy, but ochlin muatim, he has very few people to feed. Now, when you have very few people to feed, you better cut down and minimize the amount of karbanos that you're going to be bringing because of the Isser of Nosa. So therefore, maybe olos merubos, he can bring as many olos as his heart desires, and he's very wealthy, so he can afford that. But shlam and muvatim, he should be very restricted about the number of shlamim because he doesn't have too many ochlim, and you can end up with no side. If the number of members of his household is a limited number and his funds are limited, al zeh nemar, this is where the first Mishnah says in Masechet Chagiga that olos re'iyah require an animal that is worth ma kesef, and shalmei chagiga shtei kesef. Zev merubin, he's got many ochlin, but he has a large bank account, is al zeh nemar, shalosh pamim b'shana yireh kol skuchas b'nei Hashem v'lo yireh esponai reikam, ish kimatnas yado ki birkas Hashem l'kech asher nasan lach. In this case, he should be marbe and increase the volume of both olos and shlamim. Olos because he has a very rich financial assets, and shlamim because he has plenty of people to feed. He's got a large house. So the Gemara asks, shlamim merubim hechi ma'aseh. In the case where he has a large household, but he has limited funds, how can you expect him? How can you give him a method by which he could buy many karbanos to feed meat to all of his manifold household, and yet, let's say he doesn't have any money? Is he getting it as a gift? Where's he getting it from? Okay, so we have to spend a minute on the word tofel. Tofel is synonymous with the word mitzaref, which means to integrate. And what Rav Chisda is going to allow him to do is to take a minimum volume of molds to the tune of, let's say, shtei kesef, which is a requirement for Shalmei Chagiga. And after he puts down this shtei kesef, which is a minimum amount of money, it's not hopefully going to, cause him to go into bankruptcy. Then mitzaref. What does mitzaref mean? He's allowed to add most of Meiser Sheni, which doesn't cost him anything because whatever Meiser is obligated in, he's got to bring it to Yerushalayim and spend it there anyway. So you might as well spend it on a korban Shalmei Chagiga. And that's how he's going to increase the numbers. Now, what does it mean when we're saying that he's adding to the most chulin, most of Meiser Sheni? Does it mean that he's pooling these two mos together, these two categories of mos, and buying one animal? Or does it mean that he'll use up that bare minimum of mos, of chulin, for the first animal that he's bringing as Shalmei Chagiga, and then the second animal that he brings in Shalmei Chagiga, he will purchase from Meiser Sheni money. So Rav Chisda says, maybe Pargada. According to Rav Chisda, he's got to pool all that money, integrate it together, in order to buy one large cow for the Shalmei Chagiga, and he could be mitzaref both Moshel Chulin and Moshel Meiser Sheni together, pooling it in order to buy this gigantic cow that's going to give him enough meat for his very large family. Now, back on Chesam and Aleph, we had a machlokas between Chizkiah and Rabbi Yochanan about this very point. Chizkiah was against this concept. He was opposed to Toflin Mos Lamos, where you pull these two categories of Mos together to buy one behema. No, Chizkiah said Toflin behema lebehema. You purchase the first behema of Shalmei Chagiga from Chulin, and then you have carte blanche to use Mos Meiser Sheni for any subsequent Shalmei Chagiga that you designate. On the other hand, Rabbi Yochanan was the one who said Dafka Toflin Mos Lamos, that you pool your Mos together and buy one animal. And ain't Toflin Behema. Rabbi Yochanan was absolutely opposed to bringing a full behema of the entire purchase and monies used to acquire the Shalmei Chagiga are all from Meiser Sheni money. We can't allow that. And it seems that Rav Chisda, who says Tofel Mevi Par Gadol, is in agreement with Rabbi Yochanan. Amalei Rav Sheshes turns to Rav Chisda and he asks him the following question. Hare Amru, Toflin Behema Lebehema. Achamim said, and that's one of the brises that we brought in Omen Aleph, that we are doing a tziruf of one behema with another behema, which means that we take this, these two pockets or pocketbooks full of Mos, one has Chulin and the other has Meiser Sheni. We use one, which is Chulin, to bring the first Shalmei Chagiga, and then we buy the second Shalmei Chagiga, the second animal, with Mos Meiser Sheni, which is called Toflin Behema Lebehema. And that's against Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda says maybe Par Gadol. You don't buy two parim for two Shalmei Chagiga, but rather one gigantic par, which means mitzarfin Mos Shel Chulin leMos Shel Meiser Sheni, for the sake of buying that one single animal. So the Gemara says, Micah Amrli, what exactly was Rav Sheshes' problem? What was he asking? How did he object to Rav Chisda? If we're going to say the following is what bothers Rav Sheshes, Hare Amru, the Chacham said, Toflu Behema Lebehema v'lo Mos Lemos. And how could you, Rav Chisda, claim lo Mos Lemos, that you don't add the Mos Meiser together, mixing them with the Mos Chulin to buy one animal? That's illegal, and we're not going to accept that. We're only going to accept Behema Lebehema. So now what happens is that Rav Sheshes is basically invoking the sheet of Chizkiah, and he's asking as a kash to Rav Chisda. So if that be the case, Lema Le, why doesn't Rav Sheshes, instead of beating around the bush, he should have said it directly? He should have turned to Rav Chisda, quoted Chizkiah saying, Ein Toflin Mos Lemos. We don't allow you to integrate two categories of Mos to buy one animal. Ella therefore says the Gemara, Hachikam. Hachikam Arleh. This is what Rav Sheshes had in mind when he objected to Rav Chisda. Rei Omru Af Toflin Behema Lebehem, which means that apparently Rav Sheshes, as we'll soon see, had a third shita that says you have two options. And the option of being mitzaref the most with the most is not the only option that you have. You have another option. You could be tofel behema lebehema. So the question that Rav Sheshes raised, the objection against Rav Chisda, is why, Rav Chisda, do you put all your eggs into one basket? Why do you exclude the possibility of toflin behema lebehema? And you only accept one alternative, and that is litzaref mos, and buy one large animal. So the Gemara says, Kiman, Rav Sheshes is insisting that both options are available and valid. The lo ki Chizkiya, the lo Rabbi Yochanan. This goes against both Chizkiya, because again, Chizkiya says toflin the behema, but only behema. And Rabbi Yochanan says toflin most, but only toflin most. He doesn't accept toflin behema. So now you're taking both, and it doesn't fit into any shita. But the payment, so all right, that shouldn't bother me, because it could be that Rav Sheshes is expressing a third opinion. The Amorai hu de pligi, that there's a machlokas between Amorai, mainly Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan. They're going to argue whether or not toflin most or being tofel behema behema, and each one of those shitos only allowed for one method. Mas nisan lo pligi. The brisos that we brought before, and we interpreted one representing or reflecting the sheet of Chizkiya, of tofel behema behema. The other brisa we said reflect the sheet of Yochanan, that toflin mos lemos. And now we're saying that those two brises are not at loggerheads. They're offering two valid alternatives, and each method is acceptable. So Rav Sheshes understood that we can accept both brisos, and therefore we have two options of litapel mos lemos or tapel behema lebehema. And he objected to Rav Chisda, who narrowed it down and only allowed one alternative, one possibility of being a tzarif mos lemos. That was Rav Shesh's objection. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. There's no way that you can reconcile these two brises. Well, funny, the brises, if we read the brisa carefully, the language of the brisa, when he brings Shalmei Chagiga from Meiser, is achila rishonim and achulin. That's the language of the brisa, achila rishonim and achulin. What is the mashmos of that statement? The behema of Shalmei Chagiga is coming rishona l'shulchan, and that's the one that has to be kulo mos chulin. And therefore, we see here clearly in this brisa that you only have the option of metaplin behema lebehema. And you cannot reconcile the two brises by saying you have two options. So the Gemara answers that according to this brisa, enochinami, you have two options. You're allowed to be metapel behema lebehema or mos lemos. Umay achila rishonim. So what does it mean, achila rishonim and achulin? As if to say that the first Shalmei Chagiga that you bring has to be exclusively purchased with mos chulin. No, it means shir dmei achila rishona min achulin. Now, what does this mean? Shir dmei achila rishona min achulin. Let's read the Masechet. He really gives you a good idea of what's going on. He says, Sarchu tchil lavi ashir amuot beyosesh tzarch yeshava karban chagiga dainu shtei kesef mimos chulin. Avolo bira brisa b'ezofen yomi chiluk said. It means dmei achilu rishonim and achulin is an absolute requirement. Whatever you need from chulin, that's got to be laid down on the table. That's shtei kesef. However, exactly what you do with the shtei kesef, are you going to integrate it in one pot together with the most Masechet and buy one animal, or are you going to use those most chulin that are designated for Shalmei Chagiga and you will buy a karban, and then you can take most Masechet and purchase the other second karban. Amar Ula, Amar Reish Lakish, even though the Chiyuv HaKrav Karban Chagiga is derived from the pasuk Mechagosem Oso Chag Lashem, and the word Oso, the Lashon Yachid, means that only on Yom Tov Rishon of the Rega you are makriv the Karban Chagiga, because the word Oso is a mute. It designates one and only one day of the holiday for Karban Chagiga. Therefore, if you were to be mafresh a karban and be makriv a Shalmei Chagiga on the first day of the regel, and then on one of the other days, the balance of the regel, you would go ahead and bring a karban Shalmei Chagiga, you have violated the Isur Baltos. And therefore, we understand the Shita Rabbi Yochanan. What's the Shita Rabbi Yochanan? Hifresh eser beimus l'chagigaso. Hikriv chamesh b'yom tov rishon. Chozer makriv chamesh b'yom tov sheni. Rabbi Yochanan Omer came on Shepasak. Shuv eino makriv. He designated 10 animals, each for the Shalmei Chagiga. And according to the first opinion quoted here, if he brings 5 out of the 10 on Yom Tov Rishon, then during Chol HaMoed, the balance of the regular, he can bring the other 5. But Rabbi Yochanan Amar, no, that's a no-go. Because as soon as you finish your hakrava, you brought, in this case, 5 karbanos, from that point on, any additional round of karbanos is a violation of Al Tosif. So we started with Ula in the name Reish Lakish, and Ula allows you to be mafresh and 10 karbanos, 10 bemos, and be makriv 5 today and 5 tomorrow, and he's not worried about baltos. Rabbi Yochanan says no. After you finish whatever you brought on the first day, to bring more karbanos on the second day is a violation of baltos. We're not going to allow you to do that. Comes along Rabbi Abba and he says, Lo pligi, I am going to reconcile Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. And bistam kan b'mefarish. Let's start backwards. What's b'mefarish? B'mefarish means that at the moment that he was mafresh these 10 karbanos, he had an interest, a program to bring makriv all 10 of them on Yom Tov Rishon. But for whatever reason, lo stai milsa, and he wasn't able to bring all 10 karbanos chagiga on the first day of Yom Tov. But he has 10 karbanos, so bring the balance tomorrow. Why? Because he was mafarish. Mafarish means that when he was mafarish, he said, I want these for Yom Tov Rishon. Okay, something happened at the end, and his programs got derailed. But that's not baltosif. Why? Because he explicitly wanted all 10 karbanos on the same day. But stam, if a person is mafresh 10 karbanos, and he did not make this declaration, I hereby declare that I'm going to be makriv all of them today, then we have to assume that his intention was to be makriv certain karbanos today and other karbanos tomorrow. That would be a violation of baltos. Says Rabbi Abba lo pligi. There's no machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan was talking about a case of stam. And Reish Lakish was talking about a case of Mefarish. But there is no argument, there's no debate. So when Rabbi Yochanan objected to bring the second round, the last 5 karbanos tomorrow on the second day of Yom Tov, it was because it was a case of stam. And that engenders Baltosim. When Reish Lakish said he could bring 5 today and 5 tomorrow, that was the case of Mefarish, where he said, I want all these karbanos to be brought today on the first day of Yom Tov. There's no Baltosim. So Gemara says, I don't understand. This makes no sense. Why? Hi stam hechi dom. What are you going to tell me is a case of stam? If you're telling me that he got stuck because the sun set and there was not enough time to bring all his karbanos, is Haidalak Ravinu, what was the reason clearly that he wasn't makriv all 10 karbanos on the first day of Yom Tov? It is the lekashus b'yom. The sun set early, so to speak, and time flies. And there was not enough time during the day to bring all 10 karbanos. And in such a case, everyone should agree that his initial intention was to bring all 10 karbanos on the first day, and therefore there's no baltosis. Ella, what are you going to tell me? Ella, to Leslie Ochlin, he didn't have enough Ochlin to eat up all the karbanos, so therefore he designated another 5 for tomorrow. So we'll only have to eat up 5. So Gemara says, "Hi, Delach Ravinu, to Leslie Ochlin." If you're asking why he didn't bring all 10, it's because he didn't want to get into the problem of Baltolin. So you see clearly that in the case of Stama, he really intended to bring the karbanos today, all 10 of them. But there wasn't enough time, or there weren't enough oaths. Those plans got derailed. So what's the between Stam and Mefarish? Every case of Stam is Mefarish. Lo tzricha ikashus bayom ve'isle ochlin. He's got plenty of time to bring all the karbanos, all 10. And he's got plenty of members of his family to eat all the basar of these 10. And yet he wasn't makriv all of them on Yom Tov Rishon. Is then we're going to apply the logical conclusion that from the fact that he did not bring all these 10 karbanos on Yom Tov Rishon, and there was no pressing reason to force him and compel him to split it into 5 and 5 on 2 different days. Shmamia, we have to derive from this that his kavanah was from the get-go to leave some of the karbanos and not to be makriv all of them on the first day. And Rabbi Yochanan says in such a case he violates Baltosa. So this now defends Rabbi Abba, who says that there is no machlok between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. And in that very case of Stama, where he's got plenty of Shus B'yom, he's got plenty of Ochlim, and yet he didn't bring all 10 karbanos, that's called Shiurei Shairinu. And we have a problem. Baltosim and Reish Lakish would not disagree. Hachinav Mistabra. This understanding of Rabbi Abba is logical, which would mean that Rabbi Yochanan, when he objects to bringing the balance of the karbanos tomorrow, that's only in the case of Stama, lo pirit ritzono, and there was no reason why he should delay bringing all the karbanos today. If he asa Ravin, when Ravin came for Etzil to Babel, Omar, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, Hifrish eser behemos l'chagiga, so hikriv chamesh b'yom tov rishon, chozer u'makriv es hachamesh b'yom tov sheni. So you see the Rabbi Yochanan, as quoted by Ravin, is allowing you to bring two groups of karbanos on 2 different days. So you're going to be Shalbei Chagiga 5 on the first day of Yontif and 5 on the second day of Yontif. Is Kashan Adadi? Rabbi Yochanan seems to contradict himself. Because Rabbi Yochanan says, Eino Chozu Makriv is a no source. We don't allow him to be Makriv the no source. Elolav Shmamina. The only way of reconciling these two positions, these two rulings of Rabbi Yochanan, is Kan Stam, the Kan Mefarich. That when Rabbi Yochanan said you're not allowed to be Makriv, the balance of the Karbanos tomorrow, you have to bring them all today, that's a case of Stam. And now you're quoting Ravin in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that he could be Makriv 5 today and 5 tomorrow. That's a case of Mefarich. He made an explicit statement, a declaration, that he is going to be Makriv all 10 Karbanos on one day. Shma Mina. So this is the support for Rabbi Abba. Itmar Namni. And now we're talking about the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Omar Rav Shaman, Bar Abba, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. And here we begin Daf Tes Amud Aleph. Lo shanu ela shelo gomar. Afal gomar chozer makriv. When do we say that he's not allowed to be makriv the other 5 karbanos to balance tomorrow? That's a case of shelo gomar. Afal gomar chozer makriv. What does this mean? My gomar. Ilema gomar karbanos of. If he ran out of karbanos, so you're telling me that he can't be makriv more karbanos? He doesn't have more karbanos. He was gomer kol karbanos. My makriv, what would he bring? Ella, but rather we must assume that what Rabbi Yochanan had in mind here is that when the Brisa says Eino makriv Ella yontov rishon bilvad kishalo gomer hayom. Why do we limit him to the akrav of the first day? Is because the sun did not set yet, lo gomer hayom, and he still has time, ample time, to bring the balance of his karbanos. Aval gomer hayom, if before he got a chance to bring all his karbanos, the day ended, then chozu makriv, he can, on another day, he can be makriv all the other karbanos. We see that Rabbi Yochanan explicitly says that if the reason why he didn't bring all the karbanos on this day is because he just ran out of time and the sun set early, in such a case, he's not in violation of Baltos.